Hello everyone, welcome to a quick tutorial on how to export glTF textures from Substance Painter and in Blender as well. So I'm currently in Blender. I have modeled this object that we'll be using. I've already exported it, so all what's left for us is to import it into Substance Painter for texturing. So the first part of this process of making your glTF textures is to have your object ready. Then we are going to go into Substance Painter. Okay, so before we go into Substance Painter, make sure your object has been created or saved or stored somewhere, and then you've exported it in a compatible format for Substance Painter, be it OBJ, FBX, and other Substance Painter compatible formats. Okay, so we'll be going to Substance Painter now. Alright, so now that we are in Substance Painter, what we are going to do to load in our mesh is we're going to come to File, then we're going to click on New, then we're going to select our object from where we exported it. So I'm going to click the select button. All right, so my object has been loaded. Then the resolution, you pick the resolution. So if you want 4K textures, you click on this one. 2K textures is the 2048. 1K is the 1024. Then you have options for 512, 256, and 128. So for Second Life, depending on the object, for those of you who are watching this tutorial for Second Life purposes, I recommend mostly 1024, but depending on the object, so if it's, for example, a landmass mesh or a mesh that has really wide geometry, I can recommend the 2K for you. However, be aware that you need to pay more for the texture upload if it's a 2K texture. So we're going to be using a 1K texture for this process. Then I'm going to click OK. Now I have my object loaded in Substance Painter. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come here where it says texture set settings. If you have more than one material, it's going to have more than one material for you. Also make sure that the UV maps are properly unwrapped from wherever you're exporting from. So I'm going to scroll down here and then I'm going to click Bake Mesh Maps. Now, if you had a higher poly version of this mesh, you'd upload it here so that it could transfer the high poly details into the low poly details, but we do not have a high poly mesh. We just have this mesh. So what we can do really is we're just going to click on the Bake Selected Textures. The selected textures are these ones: normal, world space, output ID, ambient occlusion, curvature, position, thickness. You can add height, but there really isn't any need to because there aren't any extra details that we are adding. So even the normal is going to be a bit of an overkill. Let's just leave it the way it is. We can bake selected textures. I also want to draw your attention to the option use low poly mesh as high poly mesh. This one, you can select that if you want to, and then we're going to click bake selected textures. So we're just going to bake everything from the normal, the world space, the ID, ambient occlusion, curvature, position, and thickness. We are done. So we're going to return to painting mode. You can see there's a bit more detail on our mesh. There's more enhanced shadowing around the shadowed areas. So all we need to do now is export our glTF. Okay, so if you want to, you can also change your environment to view this better. So I'm going to change mine to a two-sided panorama that I got online. Then you can adjust the rotation with your shift and left click. Then you're going to go to File and Export Textures now. All right, so before we export anything, let's set the folder to the one that we are going to be exporting our textures to. To get your glTF, you're going to come to these templates. Then you're going to see glTF PBR metal roughness, glTF metal roughness with displacement texture, but it's an experimental one. So this I recommend. Then all you need to do now is just have a look. It's going to export for you the base color, the ambient occlusion, and then the normal, but in glTF format. However, we haven't really done anything with these settings, so it's just going to return a blank purple picture for us if in the normal, and then the metallic and roughness is just going to be blank as well. So will the base color. So let's quickly do some texturing for this object. I'm going to close this. Then I am going to add a simple material. So I'm just going to drag this autumn leaf. Let's see how that looks. All right, so just something to give it some texture. So let's open up height position. Let's increase this normal intensity. All right, so that it gives our object some definition. Then let's add a black fill layer beneath it. Okay, so I'm going to bump up the metallic and I'll add a black mask so I can only do certain parts for this metallic texture. So I'm going to use it here. All right, so I'm going to come to this one, polygon fill, and I will do that for these parts of the mesh. So we could have variation, bring down the roughness, change the color to a red, pair it with the blue so that the orange sticks out more. And then for the other parts of the mesh, I'll bring this layer down. I'm going to change this one to yellow. And so we can see the contrast between the roughness metallic. I'm going to make this one very rough and no metallic. So you can see we have details for normals, details for our metallic and roughness. And then also because we baked the AO will also be included in our glTF export. So let's go back to File, Export your textures. Then we're going to select the template again. That's glTF P-bar metal roughness. And we're going to have a preview. I have to reset the folder. All right, so our folder is selected. Our template is selected. Then yes, we do not want any padding. We just want the dilation to spread across the border. Then our material is equally selected as well, and so are the output maps. And all we need to do now is to export, and we are done. So that is how you handle glTF exports from Substance Painter. However, if you are working for a game engine or render engine that has great shading settings, you are good to go. However, for Second Life, I also recommend something, because the Second Life world has great shading already, though it's not the best, and there are certain expectations for your textures as a creator on Second Life. To get this, which is called the 2D view, you'd have to export using a different template, because when you export just the glTF, it's going to export with a blank version of this. All right, so just the solid color version of this, the pure diffuse version of this without the shadowing or anything. So this place is going to be pure blue. Here is going to be just base blue with no shine effects or anything. Same with this one, you're not going to get any contrasting. Neither would you get any contrast in here. So to get your contrasting as needed, let's go back to File, Export Textures. Then what you just need is the 2D view, and then you export this so that when in Second Life you do eventually import your material, you can change just the base color part of your material to the 2D view texture. So let's have a look at what those textures look like to further communicate my point that I'm making here. Okay, so it's good that they are side by side. So I'm going to zoom in so we can really see. So you can see this is how your base color looks with the glTF, but naturally you'd want a base representation of your contrast, which is this, because your ambient occlusion, metallic and roughness, they're going to be combined, so you can't really have control over those ones. And then your normal, you can see the normal details from the autumn leaf. But as I said earlier, if the render engine you're working for is already high definition, or the standard in your render engine supports textures that look more like this, then please just go ahead. When importing into Second Life with your Firestone viewer or any viewer, you can just import this glTF. So mine says untitled because I hadn't saved the Substance Painter project file, but yours, if you have saved your Substance project file, is going to be named after the name. Then the file you are going to be importing is this one, the glTF. That's going to bring in all these textures, and then it's going to break down also your roughness metallic in when you import it into Second Life. So now let's see how we can import our textures into Blender to export the glTF directly from Blender. So I'm going to go into shading, and then I'm going to select my principal BSDF node. I am going to press Ctrl-Shift-T. All right, so I press Ctrl-Shift-T, and then it brings up the folder that I am in. What Ctrl-Shift-T does is it gives you the opportunity to bring in multiple textures at once, and then Blender is going to automatically connect them. However, if you do not have the Node Wrangler add-on enabled yet, you'll need to have that enabled because the Ctrl-Shift-T feature wouldn't work without it. So make sure to go to Edit Preferences, then you're going to search for, I think it's in Extensions, you're going to search for Node Wrangler. Okay, so I already have mine. It's a part of the Blender package, so I already have my Node Wrangler installed. So make sure that this is installed before Ctrl-Shift-T works for you. Or you can also manually drag and drop and connect your normal occlusion and whatnot into Blender. Then let's see if this will work. The worst we can do is we're just going to connect this to the base color manually. Then I'm going to import this. All right, so you can do this. However, let me draw your attention as to why you generally do not want to do this. I just showed you this as a way of making sure that you never do this, okay? So look at this. Normal maps, right, are usually purple. So these are normal maps. Our normal map is correct. They are between gradients of purple, green, and yellow, depending on what you're baking. However, roughness maps are grayscale, but you can see what a roughness map looks like. So it's not really communicating anything on our mesh here. The same thing for our metallic. It's the same exact texture for our metallic, but it isn't really communicating anything. Then we have AO, but the AO doesn't connect directly to the principled BSDF. So what we can do is we're going to go to File, Import, and then glTF. So before we do that, let's just use a B select. So I'm going to press B, and then I'm going to select these. I'm going to press X. So I'm going to come to File, Import, glTF, okay? Okay, so then I'm going to click on the untitled glTF, and then I should see a new material.001, and this is what my material should look like ideally. So Blender has been able to convert the metallic roughness. All right, so you can see it separated the color from the green parts. It took them to the roughness, the blue parts, it took them to the metallic. So this is how to ideally do the separation. Then it also gave me my base color, but you can manually switch this out to your 2D view. So let's do that. So I'm going to press X here. I'm going to click on X here. Then I'm going to click on Open. Then I'm going to select my 2D view. Just click on that again to see. And this is how it's done for Blender. All you need to do now if you want to export from Blender, okay, so let's say you had already the texture set up or you just re-imported them. All you need to do is you're going to come to File, Export, and then you're going to go to glTF as well. So you click on glTF, that's glTF 2.0. All right, so mine is clashing, so I'm just going to call it Blender Arrow glTF. Then I export the glTF. No need for the animation. Then I'm just going to export my glTF from Blender. It also works with textures that you make directly in Blender with your principled BSDF node. However, you need to have this node. So let's just go back to our default material, and we're going to do just a random setup. So I'm going to change the base color, max, reduce the roughness, increase the metallic. Then I am going to add that glTF material output node. We can add our ambient occlusion from what we imported. So that's image texture. All right, we're going to look for the occlusion, which is this one. Then we're going to separate color into color, the red into the occlusion. Then for a normal, let's use a wave texture. We're going to connect that to a bump. Then we're going to go from the wave texture to the height. Then from the height, we're going to connect the bump normal to the normal of the principled BSDF. All right, so you can see some details already. Maybe if I add just the distortion, make it more pronounced, increase the detail, and then the scaling as well. Okay, so you can see some of the details. Let's also increase the distance or the strength. And yes, so we can export this as a glTF as well. So we're going to come to File, Export, glTF. All right, so we're going to call this one Purple Arrow glTF, and we're going to export this. And we're done. So that's how you export your textures from Blender as glTF format or GLB format, and then you import into your required destination as required. Thank you for watching this tutorial. I hope you found it helpful. If you did find it helpful, be sure to leave a like, then also subscribe to the channel for more tutorials like this at least once a week. Be sure to leave any questions you might have concerning this tutorial in the comment section, as I'll be looking at the comment section to reply to your questions. Thank you for watching.